Lowe's knows how to help make your home holiday ready for less. Get Select Style Selections vinyl flooring for just $1.99 per square foot and have it installed before the festivities begin. Our team can help you every step of the way. See a Lowe's Red Vest associate or visit Lowe's.com/holiday install to get started. Lowe's, we help, you save. Basic install only. Date restrictions apply. Subject to availability. Installed by independent contractors. See associate for details. Contiguous U.S. only.
If you've been thinking about getting serious with your money, like actually serious, now's the time. The Motley Fool is offering new members 50% off their iconic stock recommendation service, Stock Advisor. This is the same service that's crushed the market with recommendations that have returned 1,057% since inception, compared to the S&P 500's 180% over that same period. This isn't guesswork. The Motley Fool has a track record of finding companies before they become household names. So if you want to invest smarter and you like saving money while doing it, go to Fool.com/listen to claim your 50% off discount off a 1-year term of Stock Advisor. Again, that's Fool.com/listen. Returns of 1,057% are from the Motley Fool's product Stock Advisor and measured against S&P 500 returns of 180% as of July 10th, 2025. Past performance is not an indicator of future results. All investing involves a risk of loss. Individual investment results may vary.
Looking for a smarter choice for dental implants? Meet the Contact Dental Implant System from Biotech Dental. Trusted by clinicians across Europe and now available in the US. With a single prosthetic connection, streamlined surgical kits, and seamless digital workflows, Contact makes every step easier. It's clinically proven, intuitively designed, and surprisingly affordable. See for yourself why more dentists are switching to Biotech Dental's Contact System. Visit biotechdental.com today to learn more. That's biotechdental.com.
Chris, I'm going to wing this entire episode. Are you there? Are you going to stick with me on this one?
If anyone were to wing it and I would trust them, it would be you, so...
Welcome to the Shabby Detective, yet another Columbo podcast. There have been so many. How's this one going to be any different? Well, it's probably not.
I thought you were going to say yet another collaborative podcast, but yes, once again, another Columbo podcast brought to you by the internet. But I don't think any other Columbo podcast covered what we're covering on our first episode.
We might cover some different stuff. It's been very funny. I've had a few people ask me, how are you going to cover these chronologically? That's really the only way I figure we could. So instead, I just keep pulling a bunch of bullshit out of my ass going, oh no, we're going to take the actors who played Columbo's nemesis and we're going to alphabetize them and then go reverse alphabetical. But when you get to like Jack Cassidy and Robert Culp, we're going to have to look at their character names and then go alphabetically reverse of those character names. That's how we're handling this podcast.
You're high fidelitying it, is what you're saying.
We're going to go chronologically, and we're not even starting with Columbo this week. We are going all the way back into time.
What we're going to do right here is go back, way back into time.
Back into the 1860s, and we're going to be talking about a precursor to Columbo. That is Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and we're going to be talking about the inspector from that masterful book. We're going to be talking about... Here we
go. I've been waiting for this moment since you told me what we were talking about. Give me some of that Russian. Give me a little bit of that Cyrillic reading, my friend.
Porfiry Petrovich.
It's close enough.
There have been many adaptations of Crime and Punishment over the years, but we specifically looked at the 1935 Josef von Sternberg adaptation. It was adapted by Joseph Anthony and S.K. Lauren, and this was a passion project from its star, Peter Lorre. He pulled all kinds of strings and fought and argued and really wanted to do this. He wanted this to be his first American project because he was wildly popular after things like M, after things like The Man Who Knew Too Much, where he was in England working with Alfred Hitchcock. he was coming over to the States and he said, I really want to play Raskolnikov. Please let me play this role. I will be in anything else that you want. And finally, he was able to do this. And Josef von Sternberg was directing under protest and really downplays the movie, talks about how much he hates it. And Lorre wasn't that pleased with the final outcome. I think he knew that Sternberg was being kind of a prick, but I thought it turned out pretty darn good. I was very entertained by this. I've watched it a couple times now over the last week.
What kind of experience or exposure do you have to the source material?
I have listened to the book. I've never read the book. This was not one of those things that was assigned to me in high school or college.
Wow, that's surprising.
I'm very lax when it comes to my Russian writers. So your Chekhovs, your Dostoevskys, your, who's the guy that did, like the Brothers Karamazov. Like I'm a big dummy when it comes to Russian lit.
They assigned this to us in, I want to say, it would have been high school. So I think either 11th or 12th grade, we had to read the book. I don't remember it at all. I remember the way it ends, which is similar to the way this ends. But I remember, I guess I would say I remember probably similarly to yourself. I remember the broad strokes, but I don't remember Raskolnikov's dialogue specifically. I don't remember any specific pieces of information from the source material other than, what the beats are. Here he is, here he goes, he does these things, and then, at the end, it turns out how it turns out. I liked this movie, but I think we can both agree in regards to the source material, it is pretty far afield. By pretty, I mean very far.
I don't think that Raskolnikov was an expert in criminology or had graduated from college in criminology. That's my stab in the dark. At least from what I remember listening to, he was a student, and I think he was
a law student.
But this whole idea of him coming up with the idea of the perfect crime, I don't think that was him.
In the movie, he's like a criminal master. It's like a criminologist mastermind. And in the book, he's like a dropout. He's a wash-up student. And in the movie, there's this weird moment at the beginning where you have this really stark ceremony presentation of his diploma. And the university is like, oh, you're the greatest, blah, 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 all these, all this great stuff. And then he's living in like a destitute shithole apartment. And he knows he's not as successful as he could be. But it's weird. There's this disconnect from the like first scene of the movie right into the second scene. Because it's like, you're this great student. And then all of a sudden he's like, no, he's like living in a shithole. And it's weird because just the setup alone almost makes no sense.
I love that graduation scene with all of the men in silhouette.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
And you can pick out Lorre so easily from that haircut. He's a little bit smaller stature than anybody else. I noticed they put smaller actors next to him, but he's still the smallest person there. And yeah, I love that. And then he comes out of the shadows and it's like, oh, that's so nice. But he writes this article for a paper and they don't credit him in the article, and he just seems very mad about it. There's this whole thing to do with money that goes through both the movie and, of course, through the Dostoevsky work as well. But in the movie, he doesn't have any money. He is pawning a whole bunch of stuff. He's desperate to get money. Even though he has this published article, apparently they didn't pay him or anything. He ends up murdering this woman who's a pawnbroker who runs a pawn operation out of her house, which is weird, her apartment.
Seems very dangerous. They mention that essentially up front. They're like, she never leaves. Why is that? Because people would break into where she lives and steal everything.
Because she pretty much owns almost everybody's stuff at this point because everybody's fucking poor.
And that's, obviously the undercurrent of poverty is what's important to Crime and Punishment. Desperate times, desperate people making desperate decisions. And you have Raskolnikov making, kind of the ultimate decision of, I'm going to murder the pawnbroker to further my own financial gain, I guess is the way you could look at it. But there also does seem to be this interplay between, or in his own mind of, can I get away with it? I know how to get away with it, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you have the anarchist cookbook and you have the ability to make a bomb, should you make a bomb then? And it's that question of like, if you have all the skills and talent to do something terrible, should you, or should you just rest calmly knowing that you're a better person who can withstand that temptation? Obviously, he can't, but that's one of the big kind of questions that at least this version of Crime and Punishment asks.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
So he figures out this way he's going to tie all these knots to make her work at trying to unwrap this package, and he brings a poker from his fire with him, which seems really kind of odd. Why would you bring the murder weapon with you rather than using something there? But I guess for sure you have something that you're going to kill her with. And then, of course, after he murders her, somebody comes knocking on the door and just completely ruins his plans. He had been looking in the wrong place for the loot. It turns out very bad. And the police come to him the next day and say, hey, the inspector wants to see you down at the office. What do you know? The inspector has read that article and says, I want this guy to help me solve this case because he says that the police are incompetent and I want him to help me out. Or at least that's what Petrovich says. And that's where the intersection of Lieutenant Columbo and Inspector Petrovich really come in. And to the point where I'm watching this movie and my wife's like, this is like Columbo. And I'm like, yes, exactly.
That was 100% the intention.
I said, we are watching this for the first episode of the Shabby Detective, where normally we will be talking about Lieutenant Columbo, but on this, I kind of want to look at the historical roots of Lieutenant Columbo. And Levinson and Link said right up front, they're like, we really liked Petrovich. We liked Father Brown. So I figured let's look at this. And plus I've been wanting to see this Peter Lorre movie again forever. So let's do it up.
Ostensibly, this story is not the inspector's story. He is the antagonist to our protagonist of Raskolnikov. So to have made that big of an impact on the creators of Columbo in and of itself is important. Because again, that to me, it just goes to show an appreciation of classic literature, which, I mean, again, time and place in the industry when Columbo was, being created, being worked up in their minds. At that time, people weren't going back to things like Crime and Punishment for influence. And it's exciting to see something like that because I'm excited to see where the show goes because as the audience may not know, but let's let that cat out of the bag now before we even get to the show. I've never seen an episode of the show. The closest I've seen was on an episode of my show, The Culture Cast, last year. We talked about No Jack and Co., I guess is one of the titles. Another title is Murder Can Hurt You, featuring Burt Young doing a Peter Falk impersonation as Columbo. That was like the best part of that movie. I think we both agree because you were on that episode. But for me, I'm excited to see where this goes, given it's very strange because when we were getting this podcast ready to go, you're like, let's talk about Crime and Punishment on the first episode. And up until I guess 4 or 5 days ago, I thought that was the name of the first Columbo episode, not thinking it was the actual Dostoevsky book. So I was, when I figured out what you wanted to watch, I was like, oh, okay, it must be because of the inspector character. And obviously it was, but it's strange because that's what they end up using as a reference for Columbo when he is not the main character. Second character, but not the main one.
This movie is very strange. It's 1935. It's an American film. And I know that they've been more faithful to the original source material because the original source stuff, like I said, I think it came out in 1860. I want to say 62.
Crime and Punishment was first published in the literary journal The Russian Messenger in 12 monthly installments during 1866.
but it came out in the 1860s. So that is, 50 years before the Russian Revolution. So in 1860, things are very different in Russia than they are in 1935 when this movie's being made. And this movie is this weird amalgamation of poor Russia plus current Russia plus America plus maybe Britain, because there's talk of rubles. He will pay people in rubles, and there's all these rubles going on. But then there's also a mention of pennies, and I want to say some farthings as well. And you've got Lorre, who's got this amazing Hungarian accent. But then you have Edward Arnold is your Inspector Porfiry, who I mostly know from Frank Capra comedies. He's this very gregarious, little bit larger of a man, definitely larger than Peter Lorre. And he is like, I keep waiting for him to bust out laughing. And there are moments where I'm like, okay, how much are you playing Raskolnikov right now? Like, how much are you setting things up? There's a moment where the guy who works out in the front office comes in and Petrovich lays into him. He's like,
"Didn't I tell you to leave me alone? Get out of here. Get out before I break your neck."
Is that all an act for Raskolnikov, or is he being true or not? And that's one of the things I want you to pay attention to when it comes to Columbo. How much is for our benefit, the viewers? How much is for the criminal's benefit? How much is for other people's benefit? And I'm very curious how smart this guy is. And that's the thing, too, is Raskolnikov thinks he's the smartest person in the room.
And tells everybody constantly. That's the most important key to the entire equation, is making everyone aware of your intelligence is a problem in things like this.
When he thinks that other guy is going to go to jail, there's a poor man who gets picked up the same day that they bring in Raskolnikov to, quote unquote, aid with the case. And again, is Petrovich playing with him? Is he not? We're not really sure. That guy, eventually, things go south for the dupe. Things are going great for Raskolnikov. He goes over and gets the editor of the newspaper to pay him for this article, an exorbitant amount, it looks like. And he is sitting pretty. There's one part where Peter Lorre's got like his hands up, like his nails curved towards him, and he's either looking at his nails or his gloves, and he is just sitting in the catbird seat. He is so happy that moment. He's just like, yeah, I guess your plans aren't coming through like you thought they would, Inspector.
That is my favorite thing about what like you said, knowing now that this is what Columbo's, one of the influences is, that's one of the things I expected from Columbo, just based on the things I knew about the character, was that kind of, but just one more thing, right? Or something to that effect, right? And that always struck me as like I need to disarm you immediately. And that's what, the character of Inspector Petrovich is about. He disarms him immediately. Oh, you're so smart. Oh, you're bringing you in because we're dumb. So I'm disarming you immediately by making you think that, and, playing into your weakness of being so full of yourself. And he plays into it immediately, and he gives him exactly what he wants. I want to reread the book now because I want to know how big of a character in the book the Inspector is. Because in this, they almost share even screen time. It gets close towards the end.
I think even on the poster, his name is huge. Edward Arnold's name is as big as Peter Lorre's, if not maybe a little bit bigger.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, Edward Arnold is on one half on his own. I mean, it's, for this being Crime and Punishment, it's not. It's its own weird amalgamation. There's parts of it that almost feel a little Telltale Heart, too. Which, again, that would be easy for American audiences to digest. But there's that little bit of, even if I don't know if you know, I know that I did something bad, and that's eating away at me. And it always will. And that, you know, you have that great scene towards the end of this movie where essentially they say the same thing, where he's like, I will always know I did it, and someone else is going to go down for it. So I either do something about it now or I do something about it later, but it just gets worse the longer you wait.
It's very Christian allegory type thing, too, especially, I mean, there are overt references to Christianity. His eventual girlfriend, Sonia, Miriam Marsh character, how she's talking about Lazarus. And I found it interesting, though, that she's talking about Lazarus and removing the rock from the tomb. Meanwhile, Raskolnikov is talking about putting things under a rock.
Hollowed out stone.
Yeah, and he's basically admitting to the inspector about that, even though he doesn't know that he's doing that. He's like, oh, well, what I would do, and you're going to find this a lot, is, well, what I would do, Lieutenant Columbo, is I would do something like this. Sometimes they say the exact thing that they did, and sometimes they say something completely else just to try to throw him off. We'll have to see how that goes.
I do like the overt religiousness of this movie, especially the last shot. Oh my God, he's seen the light. He has seen the light. The actual light is hitting him in the eyes. I mean, it's to say it's overt would be, you know, would be to say someone smashing you over the head with a sledgehammer is subtle. I mean, there's no subtlety in that last shot. But again, like you said, there is that weird religious undertone of, yes, his girlfriend is very religious, and it's so strange. Again, I don't remember that from the book. Not saying it's not there. I'm sure, you know, given it's Eastern Orthodox and it's Russian, I'm sure there is some religiosity to the book. I did want to mention, since I'm sure someone is going to say something, Dostoevsky did write The Brothers Karamazov.
Thank you. Who's the other one that I'm trying to think of?
God, I don't know. I was going to mention a Ukrainian poet, but that wouldn't be it. I don't know. I know what you're talking about. There's like several Russian authors.
Oh, Tolstoy. That's what I'm thinking of. Okay. Yeah. If I do a quick search on Russian language authors, you got your Nikolai Gogol, you got your Nabokov, Boris Pasternak. Those are a little bit more, 20th century, but yes, Tolstoy is the guy I'm trying to think of.
The name Crime and Punishment would not give you any idea what this movie's going to be about. If you've read the book, you would know the character names, but the moment they start doing things, you're going to be completely confused. But I think that works to the film's benefit because in 2021, 2022, in the 21st century, I can't imagine people are exposing themselves willingly to late 19th century Russian literature. I'm not sure I would have by choice either in high school. I mean, probably similarly to yourself, I don't look back on a lot of the books I read in high school with a lot of positive thought, primarily because I felt like I was forced to read them rather wanting to read them.
There were two tracks for me. There was the English track where those books, there were some good ones, like The Scarlet Letter was really good, and Huckleberry Finn. And then a lot of stuff where I'm just like, okay. Nothing that really sticks with me to the point where I'm really hard pressed to think of other things. And then I think about my history / world religion / government teacher. And he was giving us stuff like Anthem, 1984, Animal Farm, Siddhartha, really great stuff. So those I look back on incredibly fondly. Cahill Gibran's The Prophet. And then you look at the English stuff and it's like, yeah, okay, John Steinbeck's The Pearl kind of hitting you over the head with some of the symbolism and stuff. I get it. Of Mice and Men was a great book. Okay, very quick one to read, thank goodness. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of stuff when it came to the English.
I remember everything but English. The things I read in English fondly, like I didn't read a lot of literature in the history classes, but it was a lot of like history book stuff. It wasn't like narrative stuff, but yeah, English for us because I was in the AP courses, so it was like Frankenstein, Scarlet Letter was in there. We read The Great Gatsby. We read The Things They Carried. And then we read Dante's Inferno, which is something that has stuck with me. Dante's Inferno stuck with me for my own selfish reasons, which is, my interest in that area of spirituality and shit. Crime and Punishment was in either 11th or 12th grade, and like I said, I don't remember anything about it, but that's also because, again, I don't know, whenever I was in English in high school, there wasn't a lot of excitement injected into learning these books. We didn't watch this. I mean, fuck, if we had, people might have been at least somewhat interested in reading the source material. They'd, be a little bit of a bait and switch, but, it still would have set a mood better to be like, this is influenced by the source material. But yeah, I don't know. If I had seen this in high school, I probably would have been much more excited to read Crime and Punishment than I ended up being.
When it came to Frankenstein, I didn't read that till college. And again, it was college where I read a lot of the better stuff. And there were some things in college where it's like, read this book. And I'm like, oh, I already read that in high school, and I read it for history class. Thank goodness for my history teacher. He prepared me for college way better than any other teacher that I had, insofar as our tests were blue book exams all the way back in high school. So we were writing essays almost every single test. Nobody else had me do that.
Nope.
Nobody else prepared me that way.
I am so glad to know that history teachers have been keeping it fucking real. At least the ones that teach history. Because my favorite professor in high school was my AP World History professor. And then my favorite professor in senior high was my AP European history professor. And why was that? For the same reasons that your history professors were your favorite. They gave a shit, they didn't take shit, and they prepared you for the real shit. I mean, like you said, my exams in high school were all essays, and I did extremely well in them. Why? Because I can write. I suck at multiple choice, but I can tell you why an argument makes sense to me and make a compelling reason for that argument to make sense. And that's all the professor wanted. And that's all they want in college. And now we're sitting and talking, essentially doing the same fucking thing. So thank you, history professors of the world, for not squashing our ability to be creative. When we talk about this movie, aside from the fact that it is a very poor adaptation of the book, and everybody who made it apparently hated it, which is strange, but I understand it as a creative type, I think this movie is a massive success in putting Peter Lorre on the map for American audiences in an American film, given that this is his first American film. I mean, American audiences had seen him, but I don't think they had seen him as much until this.
This came out the same year that Mad Love comes out. So you've got that where he is just, I don't want to say hamming it up, because I love Mad Love. Mad Love is one of my favorite films, and he is so sinister in that. And that's where the studio wanted to place him. They're like, this is the guy from M. This is the guy from The Man Who Knew Too Much. We got to put him in here. But he was struggling, and he was just like, I don't want to be typecast. You need to put me in other things. And I love that, because he was so great at so many things. I mean, his comic timing, there are even moments in here of levity where his timing is just perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when he's going back and forth with the guy who wants to marry his sister, when he smashes the guy's hat, and the guy's like, that was my hat. And he's like, I know.
There's a snappiness to the dialogue that I wasn't expecting. Especially, I mean, Peter Lorre's character, I would say he gets the better lines, at least. His lines and the inspector's lines are the best lines in the movie. Almost nobody else is given great lines. But Peter Lorre's delivery on those early scenes, it's just, you're such an irascible piece of shit. Like, you're such an asshole. Everybody knows someone like this guy who sits and he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, but he has no pants on. I mean, effectively, this guy lives in a squalor, dead-end apartment, writing these articles, talking about how stupid everybody else is, and he has to kill someone to make ends meet. And then he doesn't even find the goddamn money. Mind you, the best line in the movie is the inspector goes, well, there was like 1,500 rubles hidden under the mattress, but only an expert criminal would have known that. And it's like, oh, fuck. You just see him sitting there in his head just going, oh, fuck me. Like, and it's great. Peter Lorre doesn't have to say anything. You just see his face and those eyes and that, just the look on his face of just like, oh my God. It's great. This movie is fantastic, regardless of what the people who made it said. But I understand where they're coming from, because if you're Peter Lorre and you want to make Crime and Punishment, this probably isn't what you were thinking it was going to be.
Well, and to think, too, that this is 1935 when this comes out, and this is such a proto-noir for me. I mean, this is, he was also in, and this is a few years later, Stranger on the Third Floor, which for me is film noir before film noir. I would say that this is also a proto-noir, too. I mean, we talked about that scene with all of the men in the silhouettes, but there are a lot of shots like this. The shadow work, the richness of the black and white photography, and the print that we watched wasn't even that good, but it is very well shot. I mean, it's Josef fucking von Sternberg is the guy shooting this. Yes, it's going to look fucking fantastic. The guy knew how to light. He was a master of, he's the guy that made Marlene Dietrich. He knows how to shoot stuff. It was just so beautiful to look at, and it makes that oppressive atmosphere of, it's not just the police that are coming for you, Raskolnikov. It's the world that's coming for you. The world is pushing you harder and farther into these shadows. You walked out of shadows at the beginning. We're pushing you back into those shadows, into a cell, basically, by the end of this film.
And again, I mean, he obviously has a massive hand in easing himself back into, pulling the cell door in behind him, as it were, or in front of him. But yeah, well, and there is, let's just put it this way, it's smart to cast a diminutive actor like Peter Lorre in this main role as well. Alongside someone who is larger than Peter Lorre in Edward Arnold. I mean, you have him looming over him in many scenes, and then you have Peter Lorre sitting down a lot of the time when they're interacting, which, if you know anything about basic psychology, someone seated versus someone standing, interplay of power just in that alone. So it can be interpreted either way, but it's very clear by the dialogue that Peter Lorre's character does not have the upper hand, though he thinks he does. But I don't think for any moment in the film does he ever actually have the upper hand.
So I think as we go along and talk about Columbo, we might occasionally take a detour like this. But I think starting off with this film to kind of give us a little bit of groundwork, and I really want you to see the historical Columbo with this one. And as we go through, even next month when we talk about Prescription Murder, you're just going to see this stuff play again. Petrovich here is more like the Columbo that you're going to see in like the third episode, maybe. You're actually going to witness next month when we talk, we're going to see a very early version of Columbo that isn't even played by Peter Falk. And then we're going to see Peter Falk's take on it. And Peter Falk's take on the original Columbo is not even what we're going to see once we move in past that. So next month when we talk, we're going to talk about Prescription Murder and have the Bert Fried version and the Peter Falk version. And then we'll see how he changes after that. But I think really, if you're going to go back and talk about early versions of Columbo, Edward Arnold is right there in contention for being that proto-Columbo.
So we have a Barney Miller situation here. We have a character being played... In Barney Miller, it's the same character being played by the same actor. But in Columbo, we have a different actor playing the character at some point, the first episode of the show.
It's not even the first episode. It was more like a one-off special. It was actually an episode of another television show where Lincoln Levinson were like, let's do this. They wrote their screenplay, and then Columbo wouldn't go away. Columbo was kind of like the inspector, where he's just like, hey, I've got more to say. I want you to come down to my office. We'll talk a little bit more, or I'll show up where you work and make you uncomfortable and keep asking questions. So that first version of Columbo, he's just, he's there. He wants to come out to play some more. And it really isn't until Falk finds the role that they say, yeah, there's really something here. But that Columbo character, he wants to come out to play.
Well, I'm excited. Like I said, I've seen no episodes, and I'm here. I'm along for the ride. Crime and Punishment was a good little opening salvo, as they would say, for this show. Clearly, because if you're saying this character is pretty well influenced by something as kind of not obscure, but again, you wouldn't immediately see the line if you were looking.
on this first episode, too, we're going to hear from somebody who knows a lot more about Columbo than I think I ever could. Well, let's go ahead. We're going to take a little bit of a break here. We're going to play an interview that I did with Dan Koenig, the author of Shooting Columbo, The Lives and Deaths of TV's Rumpled Detectives. And we'll be back with that right after these brief messages.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
David Koenig, tell me more about yourself and especially how you came to be a writer.
I went to Cal State Fullerton. I was a voracious reader at the time and found that was something I enjoyed doing. I had a fascination at the time with old movies, the television show Columbo, and Disneyland, and a couple other interests. And that became my pleasure reading, my pleasure writing, and became a full-time job writing about my passions.
Yeah, you have written a ton about Disney and the whole Disneyland and Disney Empire, and I'm very curious how you got into writing about that.
Actually, my first book that I ever started to write was in college. I figured, I know I want to be a writer. I'll pick one of my passions that there's never been a good book about before and learn how to write. It'll probably never be published, but at least then I'll learn how to approach people for interviews, how to conduct an interview, how to do research, how to actually write. So I chose one of my passions, as I said, was old movies and old-time comedians. So I chose the comedian Danny Kaye, who never had a book written about his work, and interviewed everyone I could find back in the 80s who was still alive to speak with me. Wrote it up. By the end of the time I graduated, put it out to some agents and publishers, and they said, "We like your writing, but who wants to read a book about Danny Kaye? He's like 75 years old and makes kiddie movies now. So I'll write about something much more marketable, and we'll be interested." And that's what got me started writing about Disneyland. I knew that was very popular at the time and had never had a book written about it. So that was my first book, was a behind the scenes look at Disneyland, the first one ever, called Mouse Tales, a behind-the-ears look at Disneyland. And that was so well received. I wrote another and another and another. And I was just sort of, had this great opportunity to establish a sort of persona as the official or unofficial outsider of Disney, and that led to a great career in writing books. But I also wanted to finish the Danny Kaye book, which eventually came out, Danny Kaye, King of Jesters, a few years ago, all about the making of his movies and TV shows and radio work and such. And then my latest book, a chance to write a book about behind the scenes on the TV show Columbo.
So why Columbo? Why the decision to move from the Danny Kaye and the Disneyland books to Columbo?
All my books, how they've started is me wanting to read a book. Oh, I really would like to read a book about X, and then going out and finding it. And all my books have been, I want to read a book about X, and it doesn't exist. Darn, am I going to have to be the one to write it? That's how it started with Danny Kaye, with the Disneyland books, with the Disney World book, and as well with the Columbo book. It's always been my favorite TV show. I was a little kid when it was on in first run on NBC in the early 70s, but it was on right after The Wonderful World of Disney. So all the family was in the room with our one television set, and my mom loved Columbo. If it was McCloud or McMillan and Wife that week, we usually changed the channel to Streets of San Francisco or something else. But if it was Columbo, it always stayed. Even as a rerun, we always had to watch Columbo. And it soon became my favorite TV show, even though I'm sure I was too young for that at the time.
Do you have a first Columbo memory, like where you really figured out who this character was and kind of said, like, this is a really good show?
Not specifically, because I was so young. The one I have the earliest memory of, and consequently it's one of my favorite episodes, even though I will admit it's not one of the finest, was called The Most Dangerous Match. It's the one about chess. And I liked to play chess when I was a little kid. So that caught my attention. And there's a scene with the victim and the murderer in an Italian restaurant having a chess game right there on the checkerboard tablecloth. And I remember being, just as a little kid, wow, you could play chess with salt and pepper shakers. And that really caught, and then it has a great pop ending at the end. So that's my earliest memory of Columbo. And it's remained with me ever since, almost 50 years later.
So there have been many books written about Columbo, but yours definitely stands out. There isn't a book like this about Columbo, and I can try to explain it to people, but I'm sure you've done this many more times. How would you say that this stands out from the rest of the Columbo books?
To me, the rest of the Columbo books, I've only read a couple, and there's one that's great. There's some that aren't great. I'm not really sure why they exist, but the one that's great is The Columbo File by Mark Dawidziak, which is just classic, perfect. It's like episode by episode. Here's what they're about. Here's some trivia about the making of it or the actors in it, or here's Ricardo Montalban's memories of working on it. So it's this great episode by episode guide. Whereas I love that book and read it years ago, two things. First of all, it was written in the 80s. So a third of the episodes hadn't even been made yet by the time the book came out. And secondly, and I don't know if it was because Mark was friends with the people he interviewed, because he was very, very friendly with Peter Falk and Bill Link and Dick Levinson, but I always read the book thinking there's more going on behind the scenes than he's letting on. There's just, I don't know if Mark's too nice or if just the information was not available to him at this time, but I just knew from things that had been said and written about, even in TV Guide over the years, that Peter Falk could be a handful and that there was an adventure in the making of every single episode. Stories that I'm sure had never been told before that I was just convinced existed. And so to me, that's what I wanted to find out and share, was what was it really like to create these episodes? Not looking back, what's good about this one, what's bad about this one, analyzing the plots or something like that. That better analysis will be done by other people than me on that. I just wanted to tell the story of the making, as if we were on the set or in the story room, what really happened to bring together these great shows, the fights, the creation of the scripts. Where did those ideas come from? That was my aim, to make it totally different. I
am so impressed with your level of research, and just, I can't even imagine how many sources you went to dig up all of this information and compile it into one place. I mean, how long did it take? And what was your process to research this?
The original idea I had for the book was about 15 years ago or so. I thought, this is a book I want to read. Where is it? Am I going to have to be the one to I'd much rather just read it and have somebody else do all the hard work. So I started doing a little bit of research back in about the early 2000s, and a couple other projects got in the way. And then there were a couple other times where I started doing the project again, and I heard rumors that there were other people writing books about Columbo, and I'd go, oh, good, somebody else will do the book, and I won't have to. And then those books never came out or came out and were disappointing. So about 3 years ago, I said, well, this is it. It's time, whether other people's books comes out or not, this has to be done. It has to be done right. Or all these people who worked on the show, they're all going to be gone in another X number of years. So somebody's got to preserve these stories. And that's how I started, initially doing the research of finding what original scripts are still there, what original treatments, who's still around that's willing to talk to me, who hasn't already been interviewed 1,000 times and shared all their stories, and just finding the original source material, such as production reports, business diaries, whatever, memos, interoffice memos, casting sheets, whatever I could find that would lend a little more insight into what really happened behind each episode.
Yeah, I can't believe the drama, the behind the scenes drama. You shed that light on there. And like you, I was like, okay, yeah, there was always those weird moments. I can't remember if it's the end of season 2 or season 3, where it's like, it was kind of the goodbye to Columbo. Like, okay, he's not going to come back again for another season. It really wrapped it up. Yeah, to know all of that story behind that and why there were those weird moments of Columbo may not return. And when it finally wrapped in season 8, I can't remember. It's just like, all right, what happened there as well? I love how you bring us so much information about these things.
Well, thank you very much. It was very interesting because there was the time, and that was actually after every season, Peter Falk would basically say, "Oh, that's it. I'm done. Nothing can make me come. There's nothing that can make me come back." And sure enough, there was something. It was usually involved money and more concessions, more power, because he wanted more control over the show from year to year to year, as well, because it was keep taking so much time and keeping him from making the movies that he so much wanted. I mean, he was just obsessed with being a movie star, because most of his career he'd been sort of like a second banana in high profile work. And Columbo gave him the chance to be the star. It gave him a bunch of money. And eventually, after he was able to scale back his schedule and the number of episodes he did, he was able to have that free time to make, The Cheap Detective and Murder by Death and The In-Laws and other movies.
It was so interesting to read just how unsure of himself he was, that he is this amazing detective character, but then to hear the thoughts of just like how difficult it was for him to feel confident in that role was fantastic.
And I think part of it was because he was even though he was a brilliant actor and a just extremely smart person, he was very insecure. I mean, he'd grown up, always being the shortest kid, having one eye, and all these strikes against him. So he was sort of insecure and unsure of himself. So he always doubted the work. He always had to do things over and over and over again until he was convinced that's as good as it can be. And absolutely, he distrusted other people too. He saw the people around him and realized most of these are even less talented than I am, which wasn't hard since he was so brilliantly talented. And so it was just the whole situation was filled with distrust. And I think you can see that when you watch his performance and how hesitant, even though that's, rehearsed, that's part of his personality that became part of Columbo's personality. That was, I would say, 3/4 of Columbo is Peter Falk rather than, what was originally conceived of the character.
You're right. You were in a race against time as far as these are older actors, people behind the cameras, people behind the scenes. How many people did you end up talking to, do you think?
About 30 people who were still around, maybe slightly more than that. But fortunately, the couple of people I was not able to talk to because they weren't around anymore, were too ill, Lincoln Levinson and Peter Falk and a couple others, a history of sharing, of giving many, many interviews over the years. So most of the information I would have asked them anyway, someone already did. So certainly I had a list for each one of them of questions I would have loved, really arcane things that no one else had ever asked them before, at least that I was aware of. But fortunately, no big questions. They'd answered all the big questions in the past.
And I so appreciate that you were able to bring to light some of the scenes that were supposed to be in there, and to see what those original shooting scripts were like, and to learn a little bit more as far as like how those episodes actually came to be.
Those episodes are so tightly written and so tightly edited. It's not like a feature film where you might, there could be an uncut version that has, 5 scenes that we trimmed out because of pacing or whatever reason. Almost everything they shot, they used, or at least one version of. But there were some, like there was one in particular, one of the Robert Culp episodes called Double Exposure, which was intended to be a 2-hour episode. And they had promised a certain number of 2-hour episodes that season and a certain number of 90-minute episodes. After the episode was shot, they realized, this other episode that we plan on being 90, we really want that to be a 2-hour. Let's cut the 2-hour Double Exposure back to 90 minutes. And so that lost scene after scene after scene, some of them very interesting, and some of them that actually would have helped explain a lot of the plot. It's a great episode, but it does seem a little convoluted, and you'll watch it and go, wait, who's that? Where'd that person go? And it's all things that were explained in the full 2-hour version, but that you lost when they trimmed it back to 90 minutes.
The one with Cassavetes where they took the 90 minutes and expanded it out to 2 hours. It's like, wow, yeah. How do you decide to do that?
That was the opposite of that, in which, you had this tightly edited, just perfectly wonderful 90-minute show it's called Etude in Black. It was the season opener for season 2. And NBC was all hot on making as big a presentation as possible with season 2. The other station had scheduled a James Bond movie to premiere against it. So when they heard that, the season premiere of Columbo is going to have to go up against Goldfinger, we need something more powerful, more special. Yeah, John Cassavetes is neat, but we need a 2-hour show. So with about 2 weeks to go before it was to go on the air, and the episode completely filmed, edited, scored, completed in every way, they said, we need another 20-some minutes. We want to take this to 2 hours. And so they had less than 2 weeks, probably a week to a week and a half, to come up with an extra 22 or 24 minutes, whatever the additional time is. So the producer that year, Dean Hargrove, had to write several scenes. And there was one in particular. He didn't get along with John Cassavetes really well. He was a dean, is a committed professional who thinks very highly on doing your best in television. And Cassavetes thought television was a waste of time, and he only did this for the money and as a favor to his friend Peter Falk. So they didn't get along very well. So he refused to write additional scenes for John Cassavetes, which Peter Falk was like, okay, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And so he and Cassavetes, they rented a house and they filmed an entire, it's like a 6 or 8 minute scene, which is entirely ad-libbed. Peter Falk walks in and asks him how much he paid for his furniture, how much does he make in a year, what is he pay in taxes, all this ridiculous stuff. And at the end, he asks him for his autograph and then turns around and leaves. And that's the whole scene. There's an exchange of zero information that has anything to do with the plot, but it's so well done. It's great fun to watch, even though it's probably the most extraneous scene in the history of Columbo. And it's because it was just two improv guys just making it up as they went along.
I always loved that Falk had his friends in there, and that he, had the Ben Gazzara episode, the one that actually, did Gazzara direct more than one, or just?
He directed two. Yeah, 2 episodes he did.
And then the Timothy Carey connection. I love that Timothy Carey shows up as almost a regular character as Bert, and then comes back again when it's the William Shatner, the first William Shatner episode.
They did the murder. That was something he learned. Peter Falk learned from Cassavetes, in that they first were teamed on this low budget movie in Italy or somewhere in Europe called Machine Gun McCain, and it's there they first met and became friends. And Peter Falk was like, "Why, you're this most incredible director, film auteur ever. What are you wasting your time on a movie like Machine Gun McCain?" And Cassavetes explained, well, every once in a while I have to lower myself so that I can earn the money to do my films my way, that I write, that I direct, that I produce, and that I need money to fund that and to get the power to do that. And it also gives me the excuse to be able to cast the people that I want to work with, all my buddies, like Timothy Carey and all these other people who were from basically the Cassavetes repertory company. And that's, I'm sure, when it went off and Peter Falk said, "Ooh, I should do the same thing." And I'm sure is one of the reasons why he agreed to do Columbo in the first place, so that he could get the money, so that he could fund projects such as helping Cassavetes fund A Woman Under the Influence and Elaine May fund some of her movies, so that he could, fund pet projects that he believed in, and as well give an excuse for his buddies to have work, which they desperately needed, and for him to just get to hang around with guys he liked, like John Finnegan and Vito Scotti and Bruce Kirby, all these people he just loved hanging out with, and now he could work with them. So it was just a wonderful deal to him.
What was the most surprising thing that you found as you were researching it?
Well, the most surprising thing was how in-depth I was allowed to go through the research materials that I found. At first, I had no idea the depth of the production information I would stumble onto. So I thought it would be an interesting behind-the-scenes story, but not that. I mean, there's one climactic moment, dramatic high point in the book in which Peter Falk has this behind closed doors meeting with the liaison from NBC. And basically his career doing Columbo sort of turns at that moment. It's a really important moment in the history of Columbo, but it's this behind the scenes closed door meeting. So something like that, first of all, the chances of me finding out such a meeting ever happened were slim. But if I ever did find a memo or something that referred to it, it might say, give a 1 or 2 sentence summary of what happened. I was able to find the transcript of that meeting and basically, share pretty much everything they exchanged for an hour and a half in that meeting. And it's, things like that is the most surprising thing to me, that I actually was able to stumble into this just gold mine of stories and insight that had never been shared before.
It seems to me that the ironic twist would be that you could find more information about the Columbos that were shot in the 70s than the Columbos that were shot in the 90s. Was that the case, or was it what you would expect, that you could actually find a lot more about the newer things?
Yeah, no, it was the older things. And while I was able to get some good insight and good stories and anecdotes on every single one of the later episodes, it's really the deepest part of the story of the book is the original NBC episodes, for a couple reasons, I think. A lot of this information that I got, the in-depth, behind-the-scenes information, came from production reports and studio memos and things that the studio doesn't release. I asked Universal, please, can I come see your Universal papers? And they go, no, not unless you're, currently writing for Columbo. No, that's or working for Universal Studios. This is only for active employees working on active projects. You can't see anything we have. So I was left to find these papers through people who had retired, left, or in many cases had passed away and then left their personal papers to a university or the Library of Congress or some research institution like that. So there's not as many papers like that from the 90s as there were from the 70s. And as well, I think just the 70s saga lent itself more to an interesting story that flowed through, because it was this constant drama every single day of a regular series, day after day, after week, after month, after year, for 7 years, this straight story carrying through, which was, basically took up the majority of Peter Falk's life at that time. By the time you get into the later years, he might be doing one a year, and it's just like a part-time job. And as well, Peter Falk's basically running the show by the end, so that there was not some gigantic staff or crew. It was Peter Falk and a few buddies, hey, let's make another Columbo. So there wasn't really the story or the depth of backup materials beyond different versions of scripts and treatments and things like that.
So are you having to go around to all of these different libraries, or are you able to do like interlibrary loan or get stuff sent to digitally? How did that go?
How it first started was me traveling to the different libraries. I'm in Southern California, so a fair number of them, USC, UCLA, the Academy, Motion Picture Arts and Science, American Film Institute, and a couple others were local. So that way, the Writers Guild in LA. So I was able to do that in person without too much trouble. The ones, there's about a half dozen or maybe about 8 spread out throughout the country, and one in Vancouver that required a little more travel. And for better or worse, when it came time to do most of those out-of-state travels, COVID hit and everybody shut down. No one was able to help me with anything, and I was not able to go anywhere because the doors were closed even to the people who work there. And so I stayed. Fortunately, I had established contacts with people at every one of those institutions that I was not yet able to visit beforehand. So they knew I was coming. I'm planning my trip. I'm setting it up. Here's the time when I'm coming. And then I couldn't come. But at least I had their email address. They knew who I was and what I wanted. And so when they finally did start opening up, at least to the employees, it made it much easier for me to approach them and figure out ways that they allowed that I could get the information I need. In some cases, that was scanning materials for me. In other cases, it was having them actually read it and then give me a summary or Zooming research. It was, whatever was required that they would allow, that's what I would do to be able to get that information. Yeah, it was about 5-month gigantic hard stop pause in the research. And so while it destroyed the research element for about 5 to 6 months, and then after that, I was able to get my hands or eyes on everything I needed to after that, it actually did help, I think, with the interviews, because the number of people I interviewed were still actively writing and producing and directing. And they normally would be off on a film or TV show and not have the time to talk to me. But with COVID, they were trapped in their house. There was nothing to produce. There was nothing to direct. And if this, goofy guy calls and wants to talk about 30 years ago when they did a Columbo, okay, I'm not doing anything else. And so almost everybody spoke with me who I approached, which, I'm sure if they were much busier, I would not have gotten through to all those people. My toughest get was Shara Denisi, who is Peter Falk's widow, who appeared in, I think, 6 different episodes as an actress. And they were married toward the end of, during season 6. So right before this NBC years came to end, and then they stayed married through the rest. And she was hard to get. I'd written her a number of letters, and finally, out of the blue, I think she was one of my very last people I interviewed. I'd basically given up, and her assistant called and said, "Hey, Shara got your letter. She'd be happy to talk to you." And I'm like, "Shara who?" It had been so long since my 5th letter went out or whatever, I'd forgotten. Oh, Shara Denisi. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. So I was out for a walk when that call came. So I go, just give me 5 seconds to run up to my office, and spoke to her right then. And she was hoot, because if you watch her episodes, she usually plays a very similar type of character. This kind of I don't want to say smart ass, but very, very. It's always a tough woman who's very smart alecky, very, just a very certain type of person. And that's her. It just came through, and it was like being in a Columbo movie, because here I'm talking to one of the characters who's almost in character, because that's who she is. And I'm sure that's what Peter Falk would have been like speaking with him in real life, because he was so much like his real Columbo character.
Do you think that Mrs. Columbo was a real person or not?
Mrs. Columbo was absolutely a real person. There's if you watch all the shows, there's no way you can't go away from that thinking she's a real person. And it's not just because of, minutia, like, in episode 3, he said, but all through, if you watch through, like there's one episode at a wedding where the rest of his family's there and they're all asking about Mrs. Columbo. And it's like, wait, you wouldn't even be related to these people if there was no Mrs. Columbo. And who would they? And then his boss asking about her, and him, saying this is her car. And there's so many different ways that, at least a dozen or more different episodes would not have made any sense at all if she were fake. And I know other people, if you judge it by just his stories, because maybe a lot of the stuff he did, just like in real life, was made up because he was such a storyteller. I don't know if he had 15 brother-in-laws or 18 nephews or, whatever that, or if they really did everything he did, or if they're really in awe of this particular movie star. So a lot of that, if Columbo were real, was probably made up. But absolutely, there had to be a Mrs. Columbo. And I can't think of any indication throughout the entirety of the series where anyone could ever think, no, that probably means there's no Mrs. Columbo. You could certainly make that argument only from, well, he makes so much other stuff up. Maybe she's made up too, but that would be the only argument. That's not a very good argument.
Is the Lawrence Harvey episode, is that still your favorite?
Well, I don't know if that's probably not my favorite, but it's like in my top 5. I love, to me, the one, and it just makes me smile every time, is called Any Old Port in a Storm. The Donald Pleasance episode, which just has so much. The writing is great. The acting's terrific. The uniqueness of the way the person is killed and the clues and the way they, especially the way Falk and Pleasance play off each other. It's just, that is a perfect episode. I also love A Stitch in Crime, the Leonard Nimoy episode. I love Now You See 'Em, the Jack Cassidy as a Magician episode. And the original Prescription Murder is, to me, the best written of them all. And it's not my favorite because Columbo's not Columbo yet. Peter Falk hasn't put himself into the character. He's just playing Levinson and Link's character. It's like prehistory, in a sense. Columbo before he was born. And so I those are my 5 favorite by a considerable margin.
Do you have a least favorite?
Yes. I have a number of least favorites, including there's one called Murder in Malibu. Columbo has this panty obsession. It's just a dreadful, horrible, nonsensical episode. There's one called Old Fashioned Murder, which and I love Joyce Van Patten, but she was just told to play it wrong, and it's a convoluted mess. There's one called Last Salute to the Commodore, in which it is the most out of character Peter Falk ever acts. And so it's my second to the least favorite, because it does have it has a tremendous twist in the middle. So it does have some good things, but it's just Peter in that episode is so wrong and so anti-Columbo. It makes no sense, and it grates on me. But by far the worst episode is called, and it's a great James Bond movie, but it's a horrible episode of Columbo called No Time to Die, in which it was like this violent episode from Hill Street Blues that Peter Falk has been thrown into the middle of. And it's really this, it has nothing to do with Columbo, except that Columbo, Peter Falk in the raincoat is in the middle of it. And sometimes he's not even in the middle of it. Sometimes he's shoved off in the corner. It's not bad television. It's just bad Columbo. It's actually, if you take Columbo out of it, for what it is, it's a pretty good show. But pretending to be a Columbo. It's unforgivable.
Where is the best place to keep up with you and your work?
You can find certainly more about me by doing just a Google search on my name, Koenig. David. All my books have been published by bonaventurepress.com, which publishes my work as well as those of several other great theme park and classic movie authors. Twitter, Facebook, and occasionally I'll write for a website called Mice Chat when I have some hot Disneyland news to share.
Does that happen often?
It used to happen a lot more. Pre-Columbo, it happened quite often, but the last couple of years I've been preoccupied with Columbo, and my theme park writing has dwindled a little bit, but it's been a very pleasant change.
Well, Mr. Koenig, the book is fantastic. Shooting Columbo, The Lives and Deaths of TV's Rumpled Detective. You should be very proud of yourself, and I hope that this is a smash.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
All right, we are back, and we are just wrapping up this first episode of The Shabby Detective. So like I said, next month we will look at Prescription Murder, a couple versions of that. And then, Chris, what is going on with you right now, sir?
Right now, this month over at the Culture Cast, my movie podcast, we're talking about comedy mafia films. You know, that massive subgenre of mafia films. Comedy mafia. There's actually more than you would think there are. From a lot more than just English language, too. So there is a fair amount of comedy mafia films, but that's what we're talking about over the Culture Cast. And for that, you can find me and everything else over at cstachiw.com, cstachiw.com. What about you, Mike? What's going on over at the projection booth?
No real themes this month other than maybe... Yeah, no, there's really nothing that's coming up. I was thinking maybe it was Brad Pitt because he's in The Counselor, and we just talked about Fight Club, but that came out in December and The Counselor's January. Kind of a grab bag that we've got going on here. We're started things off this year with some light, fluffy entertainment, aka Clockwork Orange, and then doing a Disney movie, a hardcore Disney flick. So what do you know? Things are all over the map, and you can find those over at Projection Booth Podcast, which is available at projectionboothpodcast.com. And I want to thank all of you. If you want to thank us for the show, please go to wherever you download the show, Spotify, iTunes, wherever the hell that is. Leave us a review, a rating, help put us on the map here. Because like I said, there's already a bunch of Columbo podcasts that are out there. This one, hopefully a little different. You never know. But until then, we'll see you next month, and we'll talk about some more Shabby Detective.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Just one more thing.
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface-level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind-the-scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.